Amabhungane Centre for Investigative Journalism is reporting that PetroSA is intending to sign a deal with the Russian company Gazprombank, despite the fact that that company may face sanctions from Western countries. Amabhungane says it appears PetroSA has tried to draw up a tender to suit this particular company rather than other bidders who could also have been involved in the deal. The deal would see a foreign organisation investing 3.7 billion rand in producing fuel from gas at Mossel Bay. Susan Comrie is an investigative journalist at Amabhungane. Susan, good afternoon to you. What do you believe PetroSA is trying to do here? What kind of deal is on the cards?
Hi, Stephen. Yeah, it's an interesting one. PetroSA is sort of one of those SOEs that perhaps doesn't get as much attention as it should, considering that it has for a number of years been in a lot of financial trouble. It's made sort of losses going into billions for a number of years. Now, this is all kind of part of a massive turnaround plan for PetroSA, and people who've been reading the news in the last week or so will also have seen that there was a bill which was gazetted, which would essentially establish a new kind of national energy company. Now, the biggest part of that new company, this sort of Eskom 2.0, if that's what you want to call it, would essentially be the affairs of PetroSA. But PetroSA, in order to actually continue to function, in order to have a long-term revival plan, they have to get their gas to liquids refinery in Mossel Bay right. And that's where this deal comes in.
So this would involve a foreign partner. They would invest a lot of money, but presumably they would make that money back and then some.
Absolutely. It's an astonishing amount of money that's being asked for. PetroSA, when they put out the bid, said they wanted someone willing to invest a minimum of $200 million. That's around 3.7 billion rand. But the benefit that PetroSA stands to get if they can start producing diesel from that refinery again is quite substantial. If one looks at what's been happening with PetroSA, a huge part of their business at the moment is selling diesel to Eskom. Now, at the moment, they can't produce it themselves, so what they're doing is they're importing diesel, adding a small margin and selling it on to Eskom. That's how they're making their money. But obviously, because of load shedding, because of the huge demand for diesel and open cycle gas turbines, that's become a very lucrative arm of PetroSA's business. And whoever comes in would presumably be recouping that investment, that huge 3.7 billion rand investment. A large part of that would presumably come from things like selling diesel to Eskom.
Is there any difference between this company and other companies that would be capable of doing it? As I understand, there's a Chinese company, there are other, sometimes state companies, that would be able to do the same thing. Is there any difference between them and this Russian institution?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So when PetroSA put out the tender in January, they said their preference was for a state-owned company to partner with. And they wanted companies that could show that they had kind of established partnerships, that they had access to gas, to sort of feedstock that could feed the refinery. Now, a number of different companies showed an interest in that. 3 of them were sort of state-owned companies, the state-owned oil company of Azerbaijan, SOCAR. They showed interest. There was a Chinese state-owned company that showed interest, but there were also private companies who made bids for this big tender. The company, however, that seems to have been the only qualifying bid because of this very unusually strict selection criteria is Gazprombank, which is it operates in a slightly strange space. It's effectively a state-owned, it's effectively state-owned. Technically, though, it's an independent bank. It is under sanctions at the moment. It's a state-owned Russian bank, I should say. It's under sanctions, like US and UK sanctions, because of the position that it holds. But for now, it's under sort of limited sanctions. There is a call, however, to put them under more severe sanctions because of their relationship with the Russian state. So obviously, there are pluses and minuses when it comes to partnering with a Russian company. On the one hand, we could probably get feedstock quite cheaply. We could probably get it at a discount because, Russia is struggling to move their gas and gas condensate in other parts of the world. But on the other hand, that comes with quite sort of severe consequences potentially in terms of our foreign policy, in terms of, the economy, and in terms of the risk of us potentially facing sanctions ourselves. if we're perceived as being sort of, too close to Russia.
Has PetroSA explained what it's doing? Have they answered questions about this?
No, we sent them detailed questions about 2 weeks ago, kind of breaking down, all of the different parts of the bid, asking them about the selection criteria. How was it that 19 out of 20 companies failed to pass the technical evaluation phase, and that the only company that seems to get through is Gazprombank? We had, we sort of followed up with them many times. They promised us a response. Ultimately, they came back with sort of one line and said, this is an ongoing process. We're engaging with stakeholders. There's nothing more we can say at the moment.
Who makes the final decision on this? Is it PetroSA itself? Is it someone else?
That's a good question. My understanding is that they would need to get sign-off from their parent company, which is the Central Energy Fund. They would need to get sign-off from their shareholder, which is the DMRE. But they would also need to get sign-off from Cabinet in order to go ahead with this deal. Now, the understanding, what we've been told, is that they are quite determined to push ahead with the deal with Gazprombank. But it is a question about whether any of those other stakeholders are going to look at this and say, yes, there would be sort of positive financial benefits for PetroSA to do this, but it comes at too high a price for the country.
Susan Comrie from the Amabhungane Centre for Investigative Journalism, thank you very much indeed.